opposing his suit. And particularly the Ondo State Attorney General in his brief said the Attorney General of the Federation lacked the necessary local standard or interest to sue on behalf of the local governments, and that moreover, the section that was invoked to start the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court was wrongly done, because Section 232 says where there is a dispute between the federal governments and the state governments, then they can invoke the original jurisdiction. However, I'm not sure there's a dispute. As if federal government saying, okay, look, we don't like the way the state governments have operated funds due to local government areas. Now, like I said a few months earlier when I treated the story, the solution is not a Supreme Court judgment. The solution is to amend the necessary provisions of the Constitution to ensure that there's a separate account so that as monies are being shared from consolidated federal accounts, it goes straight into the local government accounts. Now, the Supreme Court has indicated that today judgment will be delivered. So we sit back and we wait to see what the Supreme Court will order. Now, my concern is this. It will be interesting to see whether the Supreme Court gives a judgment that doesn't align properly with the Constitution. Now, that will be a very interesting position. But let's wait. It's a few hours away. The judgment will be out. And by the end of the day, we may have the benefit of the full transcript of the judgment or have a basic summary to understand what has transpired, and we'll then have a clear idea of what the next course of action is. Now, I don't always agree for the state governments. Some of them haven't done the right thing, and they need to learn to do the right thing. But this is not the way to go. And given the fact that the ruling party now has the majority of the governors, and has a majority in a simple majority in the House of Representatives and the Senate, it should be easy for them to get the required constitutional amendment through. But again, time to talk.
All right, I know you're trying to walk the mine of sub judice in a way because it's a matter in court, but I just want you to establish what the Supreme Court means, because they say God's case there is no appeal. So when the Supreme Court gives a ruling today, what's the implication? Would it be binding on all parties concerned, and then we expect to see whatever, and then people move on?
Okay, so the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. So when it gives a judgment, there is no other court in Nigeria to which an appeal can lie. However, under Nigerian jurisprudence, under our legal system, you can approach the Supreme Court to review a judgment or ruling it has given, but you have to come within a circumscribed set of scenarios, and you have to provide cogent material or reasons why they should review the decision. So yes, the general rule is once they give a judgment, that's the end, and then you take your appeal to heaven. But you can ask for a review within a circumscribed set of scenarios, and if they agree with you, they will review it. However, the challenge is, will they then overturn the previous decision? It then depends on the quality of the material and the quality of the arguments you place before them.
Gbubemi, before I ask Mr. Cee to walk us into the next story, would you want to jump in? You hold your breath as we await the judgment in this autonomy verdict coming from the Supreme Court.
Well, like everyone else, I'm really looking forward to what the verdicts will be. I believe it's time to really delineate, all of the arms of all of the parts of government, and everyone knowing exactly what it is that they should do. We hope that this judgment will actually, lead towards LG autonomy. But as we have seen, even the state governors appear to be the ones frustrating this. So even if this LG autonomy comes to play, will it be something that is that has been, passed by law but would not be implemented in that sense? So we just wait to see anyway. Let's see what happens.
So, Gbubemi, I know as a Nigerian who lives under the jurisdiction of a local government, let's look at it. Do you see the present crop of local government across the 774 local government areas in the country as those who are really willing to be free of the shackles of their state executives? Or when they are handed whatever it comes, they will go back and say, you know what, please shackle me again. I want to be yoked to you.
So that's exactly what I was saying.
Mm.
You know, there's the potential that the law can be passed and the LGs can become autonomous, but then do the LG chairmen themselves want to be autonomous? And I stand to be corrected, you know, when it comes to LG politics, there's a heavy influence from the state governors in terms of selection of who actually runs and all of that. And as we have seen, a lot of them, you know, their subvention is actually from the state government. So there's that influence, you know, and my thinking is, even though the law may end up being passed and, you know, to make the LGs autonomous, will the LG chairmen themselves, you know, recognize the power that's been given to them and take that law and run with it, or will they prefer to remain subservient to the state governors?
Okay, so let me quickly jump. I think I didn't make this point. The Supreme Court should not and cannot alter the provisions of the Constitution by a judgment of order. The prescribed way for amending the provisions of the Constitution is a constitutional amendment, because in the same Constitution, it clearly states how money should be shared. A Supreme Court judgment should not come out today saying we alter that provision. No, there is a procedure, and that procedure is a 2/3 majority in the Senate and the House of Reps, and then 2/3 of the 36 state houses of assembly concurring to that amendment, which is a minimum of 24 state houses of assembly. So a Supreme Court judgment, final conclusion, should not alter the provisions of the Constitution.
Still stay with us and lead us into the courtrooms, and still within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, in a way where we understand, according to the Nation newspaper, our next paper here, it says the Chief Justice of Nigeria inaugurates justices, but then it goes Justice Adeniyi, Wike's wife, and 20 others as appeal court justices. What's the implication of these for justice delivery in the country?
Okay, thank you, Emma. So the CJN sworn into office about 20 plus justices of the Court of Appeal. Now, what this means is that there are more bodies, more justices to handle appeals that come from the various state high courts. It's straight into the Court of Appeal justice system. Now, understandably, this should portend good omens for the delivery of justice, especially at the Court of Appeal level. However, the Court of Appeal has already been overburdened because, to be honest, a good number of the appeals that get to the Court of Appeal have no business getting there. They should have terminated at the High Court. Now, 20 more bodies, yes, it will reduce the workload in certain jurisdictions. However, they still have a heavy workload. Two, these 20 have a tough task on their hands. There is some sections of the public have little faith in the judicial system. So now, I'm not saying all justices are bad, not at all. But again, recent history will show us not all justices are equally good. Now, the onus of these justices that have just been sworn, along with their already existing colleagues, is how do you improve the reputation of the judiciary in the eyes of the common Nigerian man and woman? One way to do that is expeditious and timely delivery of judgments. Do not let appeals drag on forever, because currently it takes about 4 to 5 years in some jurisdictions of the Court of Appeal for the appeal to be heard. Now, from a business and commercial perspective, that makes absolutely no sense. So how can we expand on that? How can we ensure that people get judgments within the shortest time possible, where the judgments are delivered fairly and properly in line with the provisions of the law? That is a big task before them. And the CJN did tell them that they had to hit the ground running. There was no time to wait to understand the system. And when we look at some of the justices that have been appointed, these are justices that have proven their mettle in the various high court jurisdictions, from the federal high court to various state high courts, and we can only wish them the very best.
Okay, Gbubemi, with Mr. Cee holding the compass for us to navigate the legal mine, I understand, I'm looking at the remarks of the CJN. and then where it talks about in his remarks, it was talking in the story as quoted here. As judicial officers, you have a divine mandate on earth that you must discharge with unveiled honesty and sincerity. And it goes on and on to tell them that there's a backlog of cases that should be handled, and the issue of these conflicting judgments from the same jurisdiction must come to an end, and there will be sanctions.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, sometimes I think it's interesting that these things happen because it's necessary for them to happen so that people at least can know what the right thing to do is. You know, it has been apparent that there's been not as much synergy as there should be within all of the what do we call all the different courts, from the appeal, the Supreme, all the levels of the courts.
Magistrates, and then you move on. High
exactly.
Court.
You know, one would assume, you know, that okay, if we take, for example, this is not necessarily an election matter. If we take, for example, the Kano Emirates judicial issue, we can see how there were disparate pronouncements in the judgments. And one would have assumed that, you know, the higher court would have at least reviewed, you know, what the lower court had done, because it didn't appear that they had done that, you know. So hopefully there would be a lot more synergy. I don't know why that has happened. Some people would argue that, you know, that even the court system has been politicized, you know. It may be, it may not be. I can't speak to that, you know, definitively. But we would expect to see a lot more professionalism and synergy amongst all of the legal officials.
So this question goes to both of you. Still with this story, certain appointments, because you had touched on it on the tail of that, what this next question already by saying political. Certain appointments came across. Should we say because a man or a woman is related in a way, then it gives up our own ambition or doesn't have a life? As a result of the appointment, we see some of these persons elevated to the appeal court. The wife of the former governor of Rivers State is there, and even the daughter-in-law, as it is said, of the CJN is also there. And it just, can we sort that out? Does that affect, you know, does that taint the delivery of justice in any way?
Well, okay, so the first question I'd ask myself is, are these people qualified for the position that they've been elevated to? You know, I'd like to believe that, yes, they are qualified. Are there any laws that bar, you know, their ascension to these offices based on their personal affiliations with certain parties? If there are none, then I do not see any reason why they cannot, you know, be elevated to this. However, you know, there's still that taint of their relationship with these people. Naturally, I would expect that if any cases come, you know, tied to these personalities that they're related to, they of course will not handle those cases. They will, you know, what's that thing that they will, sorry? They recuse themselves exactly from such cases, you know, so that's the professional thing to do.
Okay, let me just put this out there. Yeah. For the appointment of judicial officers, it's not a single individual that does it. It's a National Judicial Council. So it's a body, there are at least 15 to 20 members. So even if the CGN recuses himself, when it gets to the point of his daughter-in-law's confirmation being approved, the majority of the others will approve it. So, like Gbubemi rightly said, if they're qualified, they should be appointed. However, once having collected the appointment and taking the oath, they must remember that they owe their allegiance to the Constitution and not to any appointing authority or interested individuals.
No, thanks very much, Mr. Cee. Gbubemi, please hold on to a copy of this day while I get messages across, then I get back to you for that story. I see messages already streaming in. Yemi from Marina, I see, it says, well, yeah, okay, then it goes, your fear from the judge is a brief, your fear from the judge is a brief that's not in line with the Constitution, okay? Mine is that the judgment will make everyone little judges whilst trying to interpret the judgment. God bless this country. And then Dami from Ikeja goes on to say, as much as the governors have been unfaithful stewards of the local governments and their funds, how will we unleash the full potential of the local government system when our political class treat court decisions like bedroom suggestions? And then comes a message from Dio saying, there is a saying When a purpose is not known, abuse or misuse is inevitable. For this government, tell me any of the ministry that has worked so far in the last 1 year, or the ministry, I'm trying to find out, let's link it to, no. So it's not correlating to any of the headlines we've taken thus far. So let's go to Yinka Bolu says, well, Mr. Cee's remark over the essential points, and I believe the ongoing Supreme Court case is a futile endeavor. The Constitution already provides clarity on this matter. To streamline the process, local governments to open their own accounts and submit the necessary details to Abuja. However, there is an INEC aspect to consider. If we advocate for local government autonomy, states should refrain from conducting local government elections. Perhaps this shift would encourage greater community involvement and accountability, addressing the core issues. That's what he has to say. Now, Anthony's message is waiting from Marine Beach and says, it's sad the local governments where governance should be felt by the citizenry has been pocketed by governors, thereby truncating governance at the grassroots. It is unfortunate that the helpless Nigerian citizens are in the middle of this whole drama. When and how shall Nigerians truly have independence? Questions begging for an answer. And then I find Z-Man from Bristol said, why is Mr. C dancing around the issue like issue of Wike's wife being sworn in as an appeal forger? With the way Nigerian politicians have confessed to leaning on their wives to make questionable judgments, allegedly, is it not a problem? Is it ethical? Well, Z-Man, but I guess they said that's what you talked about, reprisoning oneself if it's you have a personal, if you are connected. Right. Okay. So Bristol, I hope you're listening. So let's go over now. Gbubemi, let's go to this day where it talks about the senator Ndume. Tinubu trapped in villa, unaware of acute hunger among Nigerians. How true is this?
So you see, when I saw that headline, the first thing I did was laugh, because it presupposes that President Tinubu is the only one who can do something about the hunger problem in Nigeria. Senator Ali Ndume is the Senate Chief Whip, so he's one of the highest ranking officials in the Senate. He's a member of the ruling party, the APC. And I remember that during the Senate, when they were electing their principal officers last year, in both houses, and in both, houses, at the House of Representatives, at the Senate, there was some sort of unspoken agreement for them to ensure that APC holds the key majority seats, even though I think in the House of Reps, I think APC had the minority number of officials. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, what I'm trying to establish. Sorry? Oh, okay. What I'm just basically trying to establish is that Senator Ali Ndume is a principal officer of the Senate. He's a member of the ruling party. He's as high as it can come. And then for him to say that the president is unaware of the hunger cries of the people, making it seem as though the president is the only one who can act on this is very, very disingenuous. So what I'd like to ask is, as a senator himself in the last 1 year, what has he done in the Senate to be able to promulgate or, sponsor bills to tackle some of these issues that we're facing? So the hunger problem is not just a hunger problem. It's tied to a lot of other things, insecurity, tied to, access to resources for the farmers, a lot of things. I would like to know one thing that he has done in the last 1 year to address all of these issues that have led to the current hunger problem that we have. So his statement to me is more political than reality. The president has issued some executive orders to tackle some of the things that are facing the people. For example, in the last, I think it was about two weeks ago, the president issued an executive order to tackle the drugs, medicines, health situation. So executive orders are typically pronouncements that the president would make to fast track action on these things, because changing the laws may take a bit of time, but what laws have the Senate even tried to consider and discuss and pass to address these issues? I'm unaware of any. If it's a situation of time that it may take time to promulgate some of these laws or pass some of these laws, we recall the national anthem bill, which a lot of people have jokingly said that's the fastest bill that has been passed into law in Nigeria. I'm not quite sure how true that is. So if the national anthem bill can receive such speedy attention, what other laws have the Senate come together to sit down and say, let's give these things attention so that we can address the problems of the people? I'm not going to give any attention to his statement. I think it's very weak. He should look internally before he looks externally.
And most especially when you tie the headline and his comments, link it to the fact that there is even a garden now inside the presidential villa being tendered by the first lady. So how would he say they don't even hear the cries of hunger? Mr.
That
C.
garden, okay, let me leave that for Mr. Cee.
Okay, interesting question. So yes, I think he was being over dramatic, but he did make a point that it would appear that the president is not fully in tune or fully aligned with what is really going on in the country. And let's not forget, there's a tendency, we have seen this with previous Nigerian presidents, for the inner circle comprising security officials and then senior aides to shield the president or the occupant of the office of the president from the realities in Nigeria. Yes, the first lady was trying to encourage everyone to do some little domestic farming. But the truth of the matter is, it's a valid question Mr. Gbubemi has asked. Is the president fully aware? Is he really being shielded totally or almost totally from people who need access to him? Is it correct that certain ministers who are his appointees do not have access to him? These are valid questions. These are questions I hope Mr. Bayo Onanuga will come out and provide clarity.
While we are waiting, Bayo Onanuga some comments in relation to Dume's statement right now. Let's quickly, you just help us link the Punch newspaper, Mr. C. This is food related. And so, well, it says, federal government projects massive food price crash by January. So how can someone now go ahead to say the president doesn't hear the cries of hunger in the land?
Okay, so we were treated to a post on the X handle of the Minister for Agriculture, where he came out with an interesting projection or an interesting timeline that by January next year, sometime in January next year, the prices of foodstuffs will crash massively. Now, why did he say they'll crash? According to his post, he said for the next 150 days out of that 180-day period, that there will be a suspension of duties, tariffs, and taxes for the importation of certain food commodities, which through the land and sea borders, which include the importation of 500,000 metric tons of wheat and maize, and then also a pledge to ensure that there's some sort of sustained price within Nigeria. Now, a number of things jump out following what he has said. Now, the importation of these 500,000 metric tons of wheat and maize, who actually is importing them? Where are you importing them from? Third question, are these genetically modified grains? Because there's been some outcry about the propriety or the viability of genetically modified food grains. Now, no details were provided with respect to that. Now, when you import 500,000 metric tons of wheat and maize, what happens to the local farmers who are also doing that? Because more often than not, we find out that imports tend to be cheaper than what is on the ground. Then we also found out from the Minister of Agriculture that we want to restock the national grain itself. Interesting news. Now, you're telling the people we have to wait in further 180 days. At least for the first time, we're getting a projected timeline. But again, just incredible.
So let's go messages waiting. Has tons of messages, not in metric tons right now, but again, let's quickly get them out of the way. Dan Okudwa from Igondo says, the newly sworn-in justices of the Court of Appeal should strive to redeem the image of the judiciary. Nigerians are gradually losing confidence in the judiciary. That's Okudwa's quote from Igondo this morning. And then Daniel Deji King, Adegboye Ga Adedeji says, getting a court judgment doesn't not translate into getting justice. Either way, the winner is always the judges when a level of compromise has taken place. Gone are the days when lawyers and judges were able to stand on their feet and will not compromise their dignity and integrity. But today, it goes on, the story isn't the same. Well, Mr. C is here to say, well, there are still men incorruptible, infallible in the bar and the bench. Let's go to next one. Who's laughing here now? It says, I once applied to be appointed. The CJ who was chairman of the panel also interviewed his daughter for the same position. Guess who got the spot? Okay. Now find Dami from Ikeja, from Ikorodu. The problem with nepotism is that no matter how good the candidate is, once he or she is tainted with the brand, it's difficult to take them seriously based on their own output. Ajayi Oloniluwa's thoughts this morning, and he says, well, another serious clog in the wheel of our justice system is the lack of appeal courts in the states. A lot of cases that ordinarily should have been settled at the state level were transferred to the federal appeal courts. And this idea of National Judicial Council overseeing local and state government judiciaries anathema to a federal system that we practice. That's Ajayi Oloniluwa's thought from Magodo Jari Sherry. And I find a next one, Bimbo from VI, saying, the solution to government autonomy is to ensure INEC conduct their elections and pay funds directly to the local government. That's how he puts it. The case decision won't make a lot of difference from where we are. Ayox coming saying, what it says here, it says, well, it goes on. I believe the FCT minister is a member of the NJC as a life bencher. He also has just put of the Blues approved houses for justices, which his wife is a beneficiary and by extension himself. It cannot be proper way to do things. Serious conflict of interest here. That's what Shola has to say. And from the sideline here, A.B. Bozimo, good morning to you. And he says, how does the bulletproof cars help relieve hunger in his senatorial district? What communication has he had with his governor about hunger in his district? AB's thoughts this morning. Agree, disagree, you know where to find him. I see Aderemi's thoughts this morning, giving you guys flowers for your analysis this morning. Ibukun from K2, Bristol was referring to the Senator Bokashua, who admitted that he pressured his wife, who is a judge, to help some of his colleagues back in the last assembly, right? Okay. Okay, I see Tony Tima from here. I see EK Peter, Yinka Bolu. I see AB Ambo's message, and all of you. Thank you guys so much. What a company we had this morning. Thank you, gentlemen. Gbubemi, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you, Mr. C.
Thank you for having me.
And Cisco Delgado, we see you too. Well, with next time we'll be talking, we'll be at 15 minutes past the hour of 8 for the Grapevine. Stay tuned. My name is Omatseye Ashenua.